Montana Territory, May 1882, the church bell rang once then again, cutting through the wide, cloudless sky like a warning. Hollie Hart was already running. Her heels kicked up dirt as she fled down the hill behind St. Joseph's Chapel, the veil trailing behind her like a torn flag. The satin shoes she had been forced into were no match for the slope, and she stumbled once, twice, then caught herself. Her cheeks were streaked with tears and the corset cut too tight against her ribs. She kept running. Behind her, the town of Ember Creek waited, hushed and confused. The guests were still seated. The groom, son of a banker and 10 years her senior, had not moved from the altar. He never loved her. He never even looked her in the eyes. She had not said, "I do." She never would. The veil slipped from her pinned hair and drifted to the ground near the edge of the cottonwood grove. She did not stop for it, but someone else did. Zeke Jarrett had been riding into Ember Creek for the first time in 3 years, his horse slowing near the chapel when he saw the white flash tumble through the air. He leaned from the saddle, caught the veil before it could blow into the creek, then looked up and saw her. A woman in a wedding dress, breathless, red-eyed and barefoot now, tearing her way through the trees like salvation, was on the other side. Zeke swung down from his horse. He had not planned on staying. He was only passing through, looking for work. But there was something about the way she ran, like her whole life depended on it. "Hollie," his voice caught in his throat. "Hollie Hart." She stopped short, startled. Her chest rose and fell fast beneath the lace. "Do I know you?" Zeke stepped forward, veil in hand. "It's Zeke Jarrett. I used to help your pa with the fence lines. We were kids." She blinked, the name sinking in slowly. "Zeke, you left when you were 16, he nodded. "And you were just 12, following your brothers around with a slingshot." A laugh caught in her throat, too close to a sob. "That feels like a lifetime ago." "It was." He held out the veil. "You dropped this." She stared at it like it was a noose, then shook her head. "Keep it. I never want to see that thing again." Zeke looked down at the delicate fabric, then back at her. "What happened?" She pressed her hands to her face, shoulders shaking. "They tried to marry me off to a man I do not love. My father says it is for the land, but I would rather starve than live like that." Zeke stepped closer, careful not to startle her. "You ran." "That takes guts." "I did not know where else to go." "Then you found the right place," he said. "Because I just found your veil and I am going to earn the right to give it back to you, not because someone arranged it, but because you want it." She looked at him, eyes full of disbelief. "You do not owe me anything." "No," he said, "but I want to." She stared at him for a long time, then finally nodded. "I do not know where to go." Zeke glanced at the trail behind them. "They will be looking for you. Come on." "I know a place." He helped her onto his horse, climbed up behind her, and they rode through the trees, leaving Ember Creek behind. They reached the small cabin just before dusk. It used to belong to an old trapper, abandoned now but solid. Zeke had passed it on his way in and remembered thinking it just needed a roof patch and a fire to feel like home. He let her rest while he fetched water, started a fire, and gave her his bedroll. She sat in silence for a while, staring into the flames, her hands still trembling. "You going to tell me what your father said when you ran?" Zeke asked gently. "He did not say anything," she murmured. "He just looked at me like I failed him." Zeke leaned back against the wall. "Sounds like you did the right thing." She turned to him, eyes sharper now. "Why are you being kind to me?" He shrugged. "Because I know what it is like to have no one stand up for you, and because I remember that 12-year-old girl who could shoot a pine cone off a fence post from 30 feet out." That pulled a small smile from her. "I mean it," he said. "You deserve more than some deal made over land." She looked at him, really looked. "And you think you can be more?" "I do not think," he said. "I plan to show you." They stayed in the cabin for 3 days. Zeke rode out during daylight, found work mending fences at a nearby ranch, brought back food and supplies. He never asked for anything in return. Hollie helped clean the place, boiled water, stitched his torn shirt, always quiet, always watching him. On the 4th morning, she stood by the door, arms crossed. "You are trying awful hard." Zeke wiped his hands on a cloth. "I said I would earn it." I still do not know what that means. He stepped closer. It means I am not here to take anything from you. I am here to build something with you. If you want it, her voice was quieter now, and if I do not, then you leave when you are ready, but I hope you stay. She looked at him a long while, then she reached out, touched the corner of his shirt where she had stitched it. I have not felt safe in a long time. But right now I do. Zeke covered her hand with his. Then let us take it one day at a time. And just like that, the cabin did not feel so small. The fire burned warmer. And for the first time in her life, Hollie Hart started to believe in something better than what she had run from. Zeke had picked up her veil, and she was starting to wonder if he might actually be the one to keep it. The wind shifted on the 5th morning, bringing the scent of pine sap and wet earth. Snow still clung to the northern slopes, but the valley had turned soft and green. Hollie stood near the creek behind the cabin, skirt hem tucked up, sleeves rolled, washing the tin plates in silence. Zeke was mending a loose shutter that had rattled in the night. He worked without talking, but not without noticing. Her quiet had changed, not brittle, not afraid. Just thoughtful, like she was weighing something in her chest. When she dried her hands and came back toward the cabin, he glanced up from the hammer. You ever do any trapping? She raised a brow. No. Come see this then. He set the hammer down and started toward the edge of the grove, motioning for her to follow. She hesitated, then came after him, brushing her damp palms on her skirt. He led her to a small wooden box tucked beneath a spruce, baited with apple peel and wired shut on one end. Inside, a rabbit huddled in the corner, eyes wide. Caught him this morning, he said. You ever cleaned one? No. You want to learn? She looked at the rabbit, then at him. I think I'd rather not know what hunger tastes like again. He nodded once, approving. That's the right reason. They brought the rabbit back and worked side by side. He showed her how to hold the blade, how to keep her hands steady. She didn't flinch. When it was done, she helped him bury the remains behind the ash tree. Later, while the meat cooked, she sat on the porch steps, watching the blue shadows stretch across the hills. You got people you trust? Zeke asked, sitting beside her. She drew her knees up, resting her chin on them. My eldest brother, Nate, he's in Wyoming now, has a wife and 2 sons. He tried to send for me last year, but my father wouldn't allow it. You think Nate would take you in now? I don't want to be taken in, she said. I want to make my own way. Then maybe you stay, he said. Or maybe we ride on, find land elsewhere. She looked over at him, her brow creased. You do that? I've worked every kind of job from here to Kansas, he said. No ties, no debts. Just want something that's mine. She was quiet for a long time, then said, What happened after you left Ember Creek? Zeke rubbed his palm against his jaw. Drifted a while. Worked cattle drives. Took a bullet in my thigh outside Wichita, healed up, kept moving. I was headed north when I heard your father's name in the saloon. That's how I found out about the wedding. So you came back. I didn't plan to. He looked at her then, steady. But when I saw you run like that, I couldn't let it end like that. Her breath caught faintly just once. Then she looked away. I don't think I know how to be wanted, not for myself. You don't have to know, he said. You just have to let it happen. She stared out at the line where the trees met the sky. If I stay, it won't be to hide. I want to make something, grow it slow. Earn what I keep. Then you and me got the same mind. That night she braided her hair before bed, tying it off with one of the thin cords from his saddlebag. She didn't ask to borrow it, just did it, like she was laying claim in her quiet way. He noticed, but said nothing. The next morning she woke early and started the fire herself. She boiled water, sliced the rabbit into stew, and laid out his shirt on the table with a patch she had cut from her underskirt. He found her kneeling by the hearth, sleeves pushed up, humming low under her breath. It wasn't a tune he knew, but it sounded like something old and soft, carried from a place before either of them could remember. He didn't speak right away. Just watched her work, the way her hands moved with care. When she finally looked up, she didn't seem startled to see him there. There's a cattle ranch west of here, she said. I heard the men talking when they brought lumber last week. They're hiring for branding season. You want to ride out? I want to ask if they'll pay me too. I can mend, tack, cook, patch clothes. Zeke leaned in the doorway. You sure? I've been waiting my whole life to be sure of something. She met his eyes. And I think I'm finally starting to be, he nodded. Then we'll go tomorrow. That night they ate together at the table for the first time. No silence between them, just the soft scrape of spoons and the wind outside brushing the eaves. When she reached across to refill his cup, her fingers brushed his. She didn't pull away, neither did he. They left the cabin before sunrise, riding west with the hush of morning still heavy over the land. Hollie's skirt was pinned for the saddle, her boots borrowed from Zeke's pack worn but solid. She rode steady, reins firm in hand, her posture set with quiet resolve. She didn't ask how far, didn't ask what might wait at the ranch. She simply rode. By mid-morning, the valley opened into low hills, fields fenced with split cedar and a long line of smoke curling above a bunkhouse roof. Men moved slow near the corrals, checking hooves, tossing feed. Zeke raised a hand as they approached. The foreman, a tall man in a wool vest and wide-brimmed hat, narrowed his eyes when they stopped at the fence. You lookin' for work? I am, Zeke answered. And she's here to earn hers same as any man. The foreman looked at Hollie. You swing a rope? No, she said. But I can boil coffee for 20 men seems that'll hold through winter and I don't ask questions when the work's hard. He studied her a long second. We got a cook's tent. You keep the crew fed and the wash dry, you'll get your $1 a week. I'll take it, she said. Zeke nodded once. I'll stay on for branding if you've got space. You break horses? I do. The foreman gave a short nod. Supper's at dusk. We'll see what you're both worth by then. By midday, Hollie was elbow-deep in flour, sleeves rolled, apron tied with twine she'd found near the tack shed. The bunkhouse cook, a woman named Esther with a limp and a sharp tongue, handed her a knife without preamble and told her to start peeling. They worked in rhythm, saying little. But by the time the stew boiled, Esther gave a small grunt of approval. Outside, Zeke worked a buckskin gelding through its first saddling, his voice low and steady as the animal danced beneath him. He didn't look toward the cooktent, didn't need to. He could feel her there, close enough to hold if the world ever gave him the chance. That night they ate with the hands. No one spoke much. Hollie sat at the end of the table, face flushed from the heat of the fire and the weight of watchful eyes. She didn't shrink from it. She passed the tin cups, ladled the stew, and nodded when someone said it was good enough to eat twice. Later, after the stars came out and the camp went quiet, Zeke found her standing near the water trough, sleeves damp, hair loose down her back. You all right? He asked. She turned toward him. I scrubbed for an hour and still smell like onions. He smiled gently. You smell like work, that's never a bad thing. She leaned against the post. I saw you with the gelding. He's nervous, needs patience. You're good with him. Zeke shifted his weight. And you're good in that kitchen. Esther didn't spit once today, that's a miracle. Hollie looked down, brushing a splinter off her palm. You meant what you said about finding land of our own. I meant it, but only if you want that too. She hesitated, then said, I don't want to be under anyone's roof but my own. Not anymore. Then let's keep saving. We'll find a plot, build something worth waking up to. She met his gaze, the firelight from the bunkhouse flickering in her eyes. What if I don't know how to be with someone? Not proper like a wife is supposed to. You don't have to be anything except what you are. He stepped closer, not touching her, just letting the nearness speak. We'll figure the rest day by day. A silence stretched between them, thick with understanding. Then she reached up, pressed her palm lightly to his chest, just over his heart. I believe you, she said. And for Zeke, who'd wandered through towns and dust and silence for years, that touch was the closest thing to home he'd ever known. They didn't kiss. Not that night. But when they parted, she looked back once before slipping into the cooktent. And Zeke stood outside until the lantern dimmed, watching the place where she'd gone, knowing without question he would follow her anywhere. By late June, the cottonwoods along the creek had leafed out thick and green, their branches whispering overhead like secrets passed between old friends. Hollie moved easily now through the rhythm of ranch life, her hands strong from scrubbing, her back used to the ache that came after standing from sunup to dusk. The women in the cooktent had grown to speak to her plainly, and the ranch hands no longer looked sideways when she passed. She had earned her place, not by asking, but by showing up every day and doing what needed doing. Zeke had taken to the gelding with early rides, pushing him longer across the pasture line, testing his edge, then easing him back. He worked quiet but kept close, always circling toward her in the evenings when the light softened and the day's sweat cooled. One night after the last pan was scrubbed and the bunkhouse windows dimmed, Hollie found him near the far corral, sitting on the rail with his boot heel hooked under the lowest rung. "You look like a man waiting on a sign," she said, folding her arms across her apron. "I've been thinking on something," he answered, gaze fixed on the hills beyond the fence. She walked up beside him, resting her elbow on the post. "Go on, then." "There's land opening near the Judith Basin," he said. "A man I met in Lewistown said the soil's clean, river runs sweet. It'll go fast once word spreads." She leaned into the post, watching his profile in the blue light. "You want to claim some?" "I want to build something that don't vanish when the job ends. I've carried too many bedrolls across too many counties." She tapped her fingers against the wood. "We'd need seed, tools, lumber. I've been putting half my pay aside. So have I." Zeke turned, finally meeting her eyes. "Then maybe it's time we stop talking like two people just passing through." The wind stirred her hair, brushing it against her cheek. "You think we're something more now? I know it," he said, steady and low, "but I'll wait till you say it." She stepped down from the rail, brushing dirt from her palms. "I'm not waiting. I just wanted to be sure I could stand on my own before I stood beside someone else." He dropped down next to her, his boots soft against the packed earth. "And are you?" She nodded once. "I am." They stood in the quiet for a long moment, the only sound the slow creak of the corral gate in the breeze. Zeke reached into his coat and brought out a folded scrap of muslin. "I kept this," he said, unfolding it to reveal the veil she had left behind, now washed and pressed smooth. "Not to remind you of what you ran from, but to ask if you'd let it mean something different." She took it from his hands carefully, her fingers brushing the edge. "You cleaned it. I wanted you to see it the way I see you, unburdened." "Still yours." Hollie looked down at the fabric, then back at him. "If I say yes, it won't be because I have to, it'll be because I want to build that life with you, one we choose." "That's the only way I'd ever want it," he said. She stepped closer, still holding the veil, and tilted her face toward his. "Then we make it ours, together." His hand came to rest lightly at her waist, fingers warm and sure. "We'll ride out at week's end, find that patch of land, lay the first stone." She smiled, not shy, not uncertain. "And when we do, I'll wear this veil again, but this time I'll walk toward something." He kissed her, slow and certain as sunrise. No rush, no taking. Just the meeting of two people who had earned their peace, step by step. And when they broke apart, the veil still rested between them, no longer a symbol of escape, but of a promise made and kept. They left the ranch under a gray morning sky, the kind that pressed low and quiet over the land, holding in the weight of coming change. Zeke rode ahead with the pack horse trailing behind, loaded with flour, beans, seed potatoes, a borrowed shovel, and the muslin veil folded into a cedarwood box. Hollie followed close, her skirts tucked tight, the brim of her borrowed hat pulled low against the wind. They passed no one on the trail. Only the gentle hush of hooves in the grassland and the long, sweeping lines of the Judith Basin, unfolding ahead open country with the distant promise of water and soil that hadn't yet been claimed by another's name. By midday, they crossed a bend in the river, where cottonwood roots gripped the banks and the water moved slow and deep. Zeke dismounted and stepped into the shallows, boots filling with silt as he tested the current. Hollie stayed mounted, watching the way he moved with care, not rushing, not guessing. When he came back, he nodded once. "It's good land," he said. "Flat enough for planting, trees for shelter. We could run fence east and west." She looked out across the grass, then back at him. "We'll need to register it, get a claim marked legal." "I already wired for a land agent in Lewistown," he said. "They'll be riding through this week. We stake it today, it'll be ours on paper by month's end." She dismounted and knelt by the bank, scooping water into her hands. "Feels strange," she said. "Getting to choose where your life starts." Zeke crouched beside her, letting the silence stretch. Then he pulled the folded map from his coat pocket, laid it on a flat stone, and used the shovel handle to mark the spot they stood. "Then let's choose it." They set the corner stakes together, hammering them into dry earth with the back of the axe. She tied the rawhide markers herself, hands steady, lips pressed tight in concentration. By dusk, the wind carried the smell of pine sap and turned soil. A small fire cracked in a ring of stones, and their saddle blankets were rolled near the roots of a fir tree. Hollie sat cross-legged, stitching a tear in her sleeve by firelight. "You ever think about what comes after?" she asked. Zeke set aside the tin cup he'd been drinking from. "After what? After the house is built, after the seeds are in the ground, after the first winter." He leaned back on his elbows and looked at the sky. "I picture a porch. You out there in the morning with a quilt over your legs, maybe a dog asleep at your feet." "Maybe more," she asked, needle paused mid-stitch. "Children if you want them, or a milk cow, or both." She went quiet for a long time, then tied off the thread and set her sewing aside. "I want a life that doesn't vanish when the wind changes." "Something no one else handed me." "You've already built that," he said. "Everything else is just adding to it." She looked across the fire at him. "I never planned to be anyone's wife. I know. But I think I'd like to be yours." Zeke stood then, walked around the fire, and knelt in front of her. He didn't reach for her, just looked into her face like he was memorizing the way her expression shifted in firelight. "Then it's settled," he said. "Not for land or for safety, but because we want to carry the same days side by side." She nodded once, then twice, and leaned forward until her forehead rested against his. They stayed like that until the fire burned low and the wind lost its edge. They were married the next week under a stand of quaking aspens, with a traveling priest who came through with the land agent. Hollie wore no shoes, no fanfare, just the muslin veil and a soft blue dress sewn from cloth Esther had given her. Zeke wore his cleanest shirt and combed his hair back with a small mirror tied to the saddlebag. There were 3 witnesses: the priest's wife, the land agent, and a freckled boy who'd come to sell eggs and stayed to watch. The air had that stillness to it, like the land itself was holding breath as they spoke their vows. Zeke didn't promise her riches. Hollie didn't promise obedience. They promised to stay, to listen, to build with their hands and their patience and their faith in the shape of each other. He kissed her, not quickly, but with the kind of certainty that comes from knowing you've chosen your road and the person you'll walk it with by autumn. The walls of their cabin stood firm, chinked with mud and moss. Hollie had planted turnips and kale, and Zeke had dug a root cellar before the frost. They slept on a straw mattress, warmed by a dog they'd taken in from a trapper who'd fallen ill. The milk cow came in spring, along with 3 hens and a runt pig that followed Hollie around like a shadow. They never left the Judith Basin. Hollie taught herself to read seed catalogs and wrote letters to her brother Nate, who sent back a parcel of books and a pair of baby boots, just in case. Zeke built her a rocking chair from pine, and when her hands ached from kneading dough or stitching seams, he rubbed her wrists without being asked. Their fights were quiet, rare, and never lasted past dusk. He knew when she needed space. She knew when he needed silence. They didn't fill each other's gaps, they walked beside them. One day, years later, Hollie stood on the porch Zeke had once imagined, a quilt across her knees, a child toddling in the dust near the garden fence. Zeke was splitting wood, his shirt damp with sweat, his hair grayer at the temples. She watched him work, then looked down at the muslin veil folded in her lap. She had kept it all that time not out of sentiment, but because it reminded her that she'd once run and had stopped only when she found a place worth walking toward. Not a rescue, not a compromise. But a life, chosen and built, brick by brick, day by day with a man who had waited until she was ready and loved her in the wide, quiet way the land itself did. And that, she thought, was more than she ever believed she'd be allowed.